I still remember that morning vividly. The kind of moment that seemed ordinary, but ended up turning my entire life upside down. I was standing next to the coffee machine in the break room on the 8th floor, adding a splash of almond milk to my black coffee, like I did every day, when the door swung open. Bryce, the new CEO, and also the son of the company's founder, walked in. He didn't greet anyone, didn't glance around. His eyes slid past me like I was just another piece of office furniture. Bryce said only one thing, his voice cold as steel. "Evelyn, my office, now." No invitation, no polite smile, just a command. I had worked at Aurora Dynamics for nearly 12 years, back when the company was just a tiny co-working space in Columbus, Ohio. I built the client services department from scratch. I personally negotiated the first contracts with hospital systems and logistics firms. I had trained nearly everyone sitting just outside Bryce's office door. But none of that mattered to him. He didn't earn his CEO title. He inherited it. Mark Thornton, his father, was the man I once trusted, the one I thought would never hand the company over to a suit with no spine. I was wrong. I followed Bryce into his office, trying to steady myself as a chill crept down my back. He didn't offer me a seat. He stood behind his desk, flipping through a few papers like he was deciding what to order for lunch. "You're fired, Evelyn, effective immediately." I froze. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. We don't need dead weight slowing this place down." I felt the blood rush to my temples. If it was a joke, it was a cruel one. But Bryce's face showed no hesitation, no anger, no remorse, just cold indifference. I took a deep breath. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me shaken. "Understood. Have a good day, Bryce." I walked out of his office with my back straight and my chin up. Inside, my heart was pounding so hard it hurt. As I passed the workstations, a few old colleagues looked up. One started to rise, as if to ask something. I gave a small shake of my head. No one else needed to get pulled into this. I packed my desk in silence. One cardboard box, a couple of notebooks, and a framed photo of me and my team from our first deployment in Seattle. 12 years. I gave Aurora my youth. No holiday breaks, no complaints when I had to respond to emails at midnight, post-divorce calls, sleepless nights after clients backed out. I stayed. Always. And now I was thrown out like some obstacle to be removed. I didn't cry. I wasn't angry. The only emotion clinging to me like a shadow was confusion. Why? Why would Bryce fire me so abruptly? I couldn't sleep that night. Bryce's words played over and over in my head. Something felt off. I was in the final stages of negotiating a major deal with Dalmer Corporation, worth nearly $8 million, 0 cents, and I was leading the entire process. Had he even read the contract? Did he understand the terms? The next morning, at exactly 9:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't pick up. Then I saw the caller ID. Mark Thornton. My chest tightened. "Evelyn, it's me. Mark. I just got to the office. Why did you leave the company? What happened?" I paused for a few seconds, then answered softly. "Wrights fired me." Silence. "Fired you? Yesterday?" His voice caught. "And said I was lazy, not needed anymore." This time, I heard the slam of papers hitting a desk. "Evelyn, did he even read the Dalmar contract? You're the only authorized negotiator. Without you, the deal falls apart." I went rigid. I couldn't believe it. Bryce had shot himself in the foot, and in that moment, the sting of betrayal gave way to something else. A feeling I hadn't known in a long time. Power. I sat frozen in my chair, phone still pressed to my ear, heart racing like my body was trying to catch up with what had just happened. Mark Thornton's voice eventually fell silent, just the sound of tense breathing and papers rustling on the other end. "Evelyn, I need you to come back." I pressed my lips together, not because of the offer, but because of his voice. A man once too proud to admit fault, now speaking with genuine desperation. The Dalmar contract wasn't like any I'd worked on before. It was the culmination of nearly a year of negotiations, late night meetings across time zones with their reps in Texas and the engineering team in Canada. But more important than the process was the clause I had personally insisted on adding after the collapse of the Agranex deal last year. Only Evelyn Monroe was authorized to negotiate and sign. One line, one clause, but it was the exact thing Bryce was now unraveling over. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into my company email. The account hadn't been deactivated. Strange. He must have fired me so fast he hadn't considered the consequences. And then I saw the message from Dalmar, confirming our 11:30 a.m. meeting today. Please ensure Miss Monroe is present as agreed. I let out a small laugh. Less than 2 hours to go. My phone buzzed again, this time the company number. Bryce, without question. I let it ring 4 times before declining. Seconds later, the texts poured in. We need to talk about the Dalmar deal. I trust you know what's happening. If you come back, I'll reinstate your position. I stared at the screen, feeling something close to satisfaction, but not quite. There was no apology, just negotiation, like I was some disposable cog in his machine. And now he was scrambling to glue it back together before airtime. I replied with one line. I'll be there, but I'm not speaking to you. At 10:46 IE, I stepped out of my car in a dark blazer and sunglasses. I didn't enter through the employee entrance. I chose the front lobby, where every eye would see. No one spoke, but I could feel the ripple. A young receptionist, likely new, jumped to her feet at the sight of me, fumbling for the phone. I removed my sunglasses and looked her straight in the eye. I'm Evelyn Monroe. I have an 11:30 appointment with the Dalmar delegation. Her eyes widened as she grabbed the receiver, stammering, Monroe has arrived. Yes, I'll bring her up. Right away. The 12th floor looked the same, except for the hastily taped nameplate outside the CEO's office. As I exited the elevator, I spotted Bryce, brow furrowed, fingers clenching his phone. He moved slightly toward me, but I walked right past without glancing. I didn't need his explanations. And he didn't deserve my forgiveness. Through the glass meeting room on the right, the Dalmor team was already seated. One of them, Mr. Marcus Reyes, looked up and immediately stood, smiling wide. Miss Monroe, we were worried you wouldn't make it. I smiled back gently. I committed to being here, and I don't break commitments. The meeting began at 11:32. In 40 minutes, we reviewed every term. No interruptions, no confusion. I knew every figure, every risk condition, every contingency. Mr. Reyes watched me like I was the only person in the room who actually understood what was going on. At 12:18 p.m., I signed the official agreement. At 12:22, I set down the pen, handed them their copies, and shook each of their hands. When they left, I turned, and there was Mark Thornton, standing silently in the doorway. His eyes settled on mine. He didn't speak, just gave a small nod. I understood it as gratitude. But I didn't nod back. I didn't do this for him. I did it for my own work, for the reputation I'd built over nearly 12 years, and because I would not let someone like Bryce destroy it. Mark stepped forward, his voice low. Evelyn, thank you. I was wrong to let him sit in that chair so soon, but I won't let the mistake continue. I looked him straight in the eye. I'm not coming back if it's just going to be more of the same. He nodded, deeper this time. Then let me prove you deserve far more than that. I left the meeting room at 12:35, walking slowly, deliberately, but without hesitation. I didn't feel triumphant or relieved, just grounded in the truth that I had earned every step on this path. The Dalmar contract, worth over $7 million, 0 cents, was now fully signed, and I was the only one qualified to make that happen. Mark walked beside me, silent, until we stopped outside my old office. The nameplate that once read Evelyn Monroe, head of strategic clients, had been removed. The desk was bare, almost sterile. A young staffer who had just finished clearing the space gave me a nervous, unfamiliar glance. Mark turned to me. I've drafted a new contract. If you agree, the office on the 11th floor is yours. Entirely private, not subject to anyone's oversight, not even mine. I crossed my arms. I want full control over all pending contracts, and I don't want anyone, including Bryce's former assistants, accessing or monitoring my internal files. Done, he said without pause. I want to rebuild my own team, and I'll choose my own lead analyst. I'll leave the budget open. You choose the people, you set the salaries. I stopped, looked him directly in the eye, and I want one clause in writing. Any interference or manipulation from Bryce must result in a formal review of his position on the executive board. Mark nodded firmly. I gave him too much authority before he was ready. I won't make that mistake again. At 1:12 p.m., the new contract landed in my personal inbox. I read every line, every clause. The legal language was precise, the structure clear, and the terms matched exactly what I had asked for. One detail surprised me. My new salary was 30% higher than before, along with profit-sharing rights for any deal exceeding $5 million 0 cents. It wasn't about the money. For the first time in over a decade, my abilities were being recognized at their true worth. I hit the digital signature button and stood up. A new chapter had officially begun. That afternoon, I walked back into Aurora Dynamics through the main entrance. This time, I didn't need anyone to escort me. As I passed the reception area, conversations stopped. The people who had watched me leave just days ago now saw me return, not as an employee, but as a leader. I wore a charcoal blazer, sharper than usual, not for show, but to make one thing clear. I was no longer the Evelyn from last week. Inside the elevator, I spotted Olivier, my former data analyst, standing quietly in the corner. She looked up when she saw me. No words, just a smile. I nodded back. Some connections don't require greetings. The 11th floor, once used for temporary project teams, had been cleared out. A large desk, 2 meeting chairs, a glass board, and west-facing windows that caught the full sweep of the afternoon sun. I looked out into the hallway. Empty. Still. It felt like this office had been waiting for this exact moment. At 3:00 p.m., an internal email was released by the executive team. We are pleased to announce the return of Evelyn Monroe as Director of Strategic Client Operations. She will oversee all Tier 1 client partnerships. All negotiations and contracts involving Delmar, Vantage, Secor, and other key partners will now go directly through her. Internal messages flooded in almost instantly. Congratulations from people I never expected, even from managers who had once stayed silent when I was fired. One message stood out. It was from Kyle, an employee I'd trained 5 years ago. I don't know exactly what happened, but congrats. This office isn't the same without Evelyn Monroe. I stared at his message, then closed my eyes for a few seconds. Not out of emotion, but because I knew this was only the beginning. And somewhere in the same building, Bryce Thornton was surely realizing what he thought was just paperwork had brought Evelyn back, not as a pawn, but as the one rewriting the board. The first week after I officially returned to Aurora Dynamics passed in an eerily quiet haze. The kind of quiet where no one dared to ask too much or look too long, but I could feel something stirring just beneath the surface. Bryce had completely vanished from the work floor. I didn't see him in the elevators, not a glimpse in any meetings, and his name had disappeared from the strategic planning sessions he used to dominate. But I knew men like Bryce don't vanish quietly. They retreat to plot something subtler. On the Monday of the second week, my email to Secor bounced back with a message saying my signature was invalid. Strange, since I always used the standard digital signature registered in the system. I checked the settings and saw that my name had been altered. Evelyn had been changed to Evelyn. A minor typo, but enough to annoy clients if left unexplained. I corrected it immediately. Told no one. Tuesday morning, a financial report meant for me was accidentally sent to a client inbox. An internal expense summary, something that should have been strictly confidential. Thankfully, the client was an old contact who called me directly and deleted the email without a fuss. I went down to I want to check the system log. Lexi, a young tech, hesitated. Ms. Evelyn, that usually needs upper level approval. I placed my admin ID on her desk. I have clearance for all systems tied to strategic accounts. I need the login history for the past 7 days, specifically any logins from unregistered devices. Lexi paused, then nodded. An hour later, I had the file, and what gave me chills wasn't the content. It was the name that kept repeating. B. Thornton _exec. Rice. Even though he'd been suspended from executive duties, he was still sneaking into the system using his old admin privileges. Each login came from a different, unregistered device, obviously to avoid internal tracking. I sent the log to Mark with a single subject line. I'm not looking to escalate, but if this continues, I'll be speaking with legal directly. Mark replied in exactly 3 minutes. Handled this afternoon. But Bryce wasn't done. Wednesday afternoon, I received an email from the CFO. Why is the revised Delmar contract missing the executive signature? Bryce says you forgot to finalize it. I shot up from my chair. I never send contracts unsigned, and I was certain I had attached the complete PDFs. I checked my sent folder. The attachment was missing. I knew I hadn't made a mistake. That's not how I work. I went straight to legal. A backup copy of the contract was still in the system, their version. Just as I remembered, had all the signatures, proper timestamps, and full encryption data. Rice had replaced the file. He accessed the system, removed the correct version, and uploaded a blank one to make it seem like I was careless. This wasn't petty sabotage anymore. It was a campaign, coordinated, calculated with one clear goal: destroy my reputation and reclaim control. I started documenting everything, each incident, with time, date, people involved, and affected files. I created a spreadsheet named one thing only: proof_chronicle. I didn't fire off angry emails, didn't confront him publicly. People like Bryce thrive on emotional reactions. They wait for you to break. I wasn't giving him that chance. But I needed confirmation from another angle. I texted Olivia, my former assistant who had quietly left after a suspicious restructure orchestrated by Bryce himself. She replied within 10 minutes. The Evelyn. I think I have documents you'll want to see. Meet me at the tea shop near the transit station at 6 o'clock. I typed back, perfect timing, bring everything. This is no longer personal. Bryce thought darkness would protect him. What he forgot was, I'd lived long enough in that shadow to know exactly where every poisonous wind comes from. Rain was falling as I stepped into the small tea shop near the central subway station. Olivia was already seated at a corner table, her coat soaked but her gaze sharp and steady. On the table sat a laptop bag and several thick folders bound tightly with rubber bands. Do you know he did this to 3 other people? Olivia said the moment I sat down. Who do you mean? I asked. Sam, Lana, and Pete. All 3 were pushed out after bizarre technical errors no one could trace. But I knew. I saw the system logs being edited at 2:00 a.m. from Bryce's account. I tightened my grip around the warm teacup. You kept it? Olivia nodded. I copied everything to a personal hard drive, screenshots of emails, contract revisions, even the command lines that altered the e-signature system. I exhaled, half relief, half bitterness. Where did you keep it? Because you were the only one who ever protected me in that office, and because he wasn't just sabotaging you, he was rotting the company from the inside out. I took the hard drive from her, small, black, unmarked, but to me it felt as heavy as a brick, carrying the weight of silent manipulation. 3 days later, I sent a formal request to launch an internal audit, straight to Mark Thornton and the legal department. No lengthy explanation, just one sentence. I have compiled sufficient evidence of unauthorized access to internal systems, resulting in serious operational errors and reputational risk with key partners. Mark didn't ask questions. Within 24 hours, the meeting room on the ninth floor had been converted into a temporary audit office, staffed by 3 external specialists with certified digital forensics credentials and no ties to Aurora. I brought the hard drive, printed system logs, handwritten notes, and a compiled error tracker organized by date and incident. When I laid everything on the table in front of the team, the lead investigator, a woman in her 50s named Amelia, looked up and asked quietly, "Would you like to be involved in the verification process?" I nodded. "I'm not sitting this one out." We began with the first altered email, the C-Core contract. From there, we traced the IP addresses, login times, and manipulation behaviors. The pattern was unmistakable. The same user account had accessed 3 different machines in 3 different office locations, all during odd hours. Amelia flipped a page, typed a few notes, and then muttered, "This account has admin privileges, but it's not listed among authorized executive logins after Bryce's suspension." I looked at her. "So he still had access?" Amelia nodded, face unreadable. "And he used it repeatedly. This wasn't a slip. It was deliberate." Over the next 4 days, the audit team worked in near silence. Each morning, I brought updated reports, cross-referenced logs, and verified incidents. A system once built to safeguard the company had now become the clearest mirror of its internal rot. By Thursday afternoon, Amelia walked into my office holding a red folder. "We've compiled a preliminary report. There were 17 unauthorized login attempts, 6 documents altered without proper review, and 4 instances of forged digital signatures, all traced back to the account, bthornton_exec. I stared at the folder, my mind still. Anyone else involved? 2 of Bryce's former assistants. One was temporarily assigned to the finance team. They weren't the masterminds, but signs point to their cooperation. I nodded. "We present everything before the executive board." Amelia nodded slowly. "I'll schedule the meeting, but I need you to be ready. This won't just be a report. It could be the moment that reshapes Aurora's leadership structure." I stood, eyes drifting toward the window. Outside, the clouds were finally parting after days of gloom. I was preparing to expose a system that had allowed silent abuse to spread unchecked, and I wouldn't back down until the truth was exactly where it belonged. That morning, the atmosphere on the 10th floor of Aurora Dynamics was so thick with tension that I could almost feel it pressing against my skin. A special meeting had been called, with all executive board members, senior department heads, and the internal audit team present. At exactly 9:00 a.m., the door to the conference room closed, and the silence was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock. I sat to Amelia's left, the head of the audit team, and across from Mark Thornton. The empty chair at the head of the table reserved for Bryce remained vacant. I wasn't surprised. If I were him, I'd be late too, dragging out the moment to maintain his illusion of control. At 9:08, the door opened. Bryce entered, his dark gray suit impeccably pressed, his face unsettlingly calm. He smiled, slightly, nodded at Mark, and sat down, as if this meeting were just another weekly update. Amelia wasted no time. "We'll begin." She opened the folder in front of her, her voice steady as she began reading, but the contents were far from mundane. "We've completed the initial investigation into the internal process discrepancies and unauthorized system access at Aurora Dynamics. Through log analysis, data comparison, and staff interviews, we identified 17 instances of unauthorized access from the highest level account under the user ID bthornton_exec. I glanced at Bryce. His jaw tightened, but he didn't say a word. We also found that 6 critical documents related to business contracts, including those with C-Core, Dalmar, and Bell South, had been modified, with 4 versions showing altered electronic signatures or dates, with no record of these changes, indicating unauthorized admin access. Amelia turned to a new page and looked Bryce directly in the eye. All these activities were conducted from devices within the building during late night hours or outside regular business hours. No one else except Bryce Thornton had the level of access needed. Bryce chuckled softly, almost sarcastically. Indirect evidence. Everyone knows the Aurora system had permission issues since last year. I spoke without turning around. Bryce, if the system had issues, why did all the alterations happen to the documents I was managing? And why was my signature the one that was wrong? Are you implying some hacker knew exactly when I'd be on vacation to set me up? Bryce glared at me. You're overplaying everything to get me out of the company. Amelia tapped the table lightly. I don't have an emotional agenda. I'm simply presenting the facts. And the fact is, if Evelyn Monroe hadn't proactively flagged and reported this early, a nearly $8 million 0 cents contract with Dalmar could have been canceled due to forgotten signatures, wrong versions sent, or system errors. A board member, Mrs. Linda Folsom, flipped through her papers. I have a question. Bryce, is it true that during your suspension, you continued using the executive account without reporting it? Bryce looked around, his voice now firm. I was just checking progress, doing my job. Mark finally spoke, his voice low and heavy. No, Bryce, you didn't do your job. You destroyed trust, interfered with the system, smeared colleagues, and caused reputational damage to the entire company. Bryce slammed his hand on the table and stood up, his face flushed with anger. You can't say that. I kept this company running when he was too weak to make decisions. Mark stood slowly. The biggest mistake I made was thinking that giving you power would make you grow. But people don't grow through titles. They grow by how they treat others. The room fell silent. Mark turned to the board members. I motioned to immediately suspend all executive positions held by Bryce Thornton at Aurora Dynamics, pending the final investigation by the Ethics Committee and the company's legal team. No one opposed. No one spoke in his defense. Bryce was frozen, like all the air had been sucked out of the room. I caught his eyes, no longer smug or defiant, only confusion and helplessness. When he left the meeting room, I didn't follow. I didn't need to win. I just needed justice. 2 weeks after Bryce's suspension, the atmosphere at Aurora Dynamics changed so quickly that even I was taken aback. The hallways no longer echoed with the whispers of tension. The conference rooms were silent, devoid of arguments between rival factions. Even the coffee area, once a refuge for avoiding work, had turned into a genuine meeting spot between departments. No one mentioned Bryce anymore, not because they had forgotten, but because they no longer had to fear him. On Monday at 8:42 a.m., I received a short message from Mark. Can you come to my office at 9 o'clock and bring your schedule? I didn't ask more. Having worked with him for nearly 12 years, I knew that when Mark didn't beat around the bush, something significant was happening. The executive office that day was unusually bright. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, directly hitting the desk where Mark was sitting, hands placed on a blue file. Evelyn, I've thought long and hard about everything. You didn't just save this company from a strategic mistake. You've kept the team, the partners, and the trust of those who once thought silence was the only way to survive. I looked at him, waiting for what was coming next. I want you to take the position of Director of Strategic Clients, report directly to me, oversee the entire senior team, and rebuild the feedback structure from the regional management teams. I paused for a moment, then asked directly, does this position have the authority to make internal policy decisions? Mark nodded. Absolutely, as long as you have reasonable proposals and supporting evidence. I sat down, opening the black leather notebook I had brought with me since last week. The first page listed 3 conditions. 1, I want to set up an anonymous feedback system so employees can speak up without fear of retaliation. 2, I need an independent budget to retrain the middle management team, especially those who were shaped by the old power structure. 3, I want the final say in appointing anyone to the strategic department. No intermediaries. No soft structures. Mark didn't interrupt. When I finished, he simply smiled. If you hadn't said those things, I'd be surprised. He slid a folder toward me. The contract was ready, the salary was at an executive level too, and there was a 2-year retention bonus. They picked up the pen. But before signing, I asked, "What about Bryce?" Mark leaned back in his chair, his voice serious. "The board has approved his dismissal. His file will remain closed internally to avoid media attention. He's considering leaving the state. I won't stop him, but I won't let anyone like him walk through these doors again." I signed. Each stroke was clear, steady, no hesitation, no second thoughts. That afternoon, the official announcement was sent via email to the entire company. "We are pleased to announce that starting today, Evelyn Monroe will assume the position of Director of Strategic Clients, responsible for overseeing all operations related to building and developing strategic partnerships at Aurora Dynamics. With her extensive experience, unwavering determination, and clear vision, Ms. Monroe will lead the team towards sustainable, transparent, and fair development at every level of operation." My inbox flooded within 3 hours. Messages from old colleagues, from those who had been pushed out by Bryce, even from interns who had once quietly lingered by the printers. Finally, someone who dares to call things by their true name. I never thought I'd want to stay long at Aurora, until this week. Thank you for not staying silent. I read each message. Not a single one was deleted. That evening, I walked into my new office, a space that wasn't luxurious, but big enough to hold a 10-person meeting, and private enough to hear from any junior staff without interruption. I looked up at the blank white wall, and the only thought that ran through my mind was, value doesn't come from being given power, it comes from how you use that power to protect others. 3 months after I officially became the Director of Strategic Client Operations at Aurora Dynamics, my internal dashboard had nearly no red markings left. Reports marked issues from departments had now been replaced with notes like, "Resolved, policy updated, staff reinstated." The anonymous feedback system I'd requested had been implemented on a separate platform, not linked to internal email, monitored by an independent security team. In the first 2 weeks alone, over 60 reports were submitted, mostly small issues that had been overlooked for far too long. A manager who frequently bullied employees in meetings, a supervisor who showed favoritism to relatives, and an assistant who'd been unfairly pressured for speaking up about budget allocation. I didn't handle it all myself. I formed an internal advisory group with 4 members, one of them being Olivia, who had been pushed out by the same tactics I had to endure. She came back, this time as the head of corporate culture transformation. I didn't need to ask if she was ready. Olivia's eyes during the interview spoke louder than any resume ever could. In addition, I reached out to those who had quietly left Aurora under Bryce's reign. Sam, the e-signature specialist, Lana, the former regional manager, Pete, the ex-training lead. All 3 received a straightforward invitation from me. "I want to fix what the old system forced you to leave, not by apologizing, but by inviting you to rebuild together." Sam took less than 24 hours to send me her resume. Lana called me that night, saying she never imagined she'd receive a call from an executive asking, "Do you still want to come back?" Pete's response was more succinct. "I'm in, but this time, I pick the role. I won't be invisible anymore." I agreed without hesitation. By the 10th week, as I passed the break room on the 8th floor where Bryce had once coldly ordered me to his office, I saw a group of new interns chatting. They laughed, jotting notes on the whiteboard, taking turns sharing ideas in a small discussion. No one was cut off, no one was pushed aside. I stood there for a few minutes, unnoticed, and I didn't need them to notice. That was the best sign. The environment was healing itself. Later that day, I received a text from Mark. "It's on the cover. You should take a look." I opened the logistics industry newsletter. The headline read, "Aurora Dynamics, a cultural transformation model centered on employees." A heading. Under the leadership of Director Evelyn Monroe, the company has completely revamped its management approach after an internal crisis. I didn't share the article on social media. I didn't send it to friends. I simply printed it out, folded it in quarters, and placed it in the drawer to the right of my desk, just below the black notebook where I had recorded every piece of evidence, every bitter day of silence. That late afternoon, I walked alone to the sixth floor, the seldom visited area with the glass-walled meeting room where the Dalmar contract had been signed. The room was unchanged, a round oak table, soft lighting, and large windows looking out over the city park. I stood there, my hand resting on the cold surface of the table, slowly replaying everything, from the morning I was unceremoniously fired like office trash, to when I returned with the terms in hand, to when I exposed Bryce in front of the board. And now, here, no medals, no celebrations, just one truth. I had survived, not by luck, but by refusing to let others define who I was. No one, not even the founder's son, had the right to turn a woman like me into a shadow in a place I had built with sweat and loyalty. I lightly touched the glass, smiling. If tomorrow I had to leave this place, I would still walk away with my head held high, because I knew titles could change, offices could be transferred, but the values I held, justice, transparency, and self-respect, those were the true legacy. Evelyn's story is a testament that a person's value is not defined by their title or temporary recognition, but by their resilience in standing up against injustice. In real life, we can't always avoid those who abuse their power, but we always have the choice to stay silent or to rise up. Evelyn chose to rise, not just to seek justice for herself, but to pave the way for a better environment for everyone. Sometimes the greatest legacy we leave is the courage to say enough at the right moment. What do you think about Evelyn's journey? What would you do if you were in her shoes? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more deep and emotional stories about family and life.